want to do is I want to read this article from the American Spectator. Does Jazz Jennings regret transitioning? And I just want to talk about it. And I want to talk about my perception of Jazz Jennings. Basically, again, like I said, if you missed the beginning of the show, I was watching I Am Jazz back when I was a Democrat during like the transition period leading up to her bottom surgery. And again, I do use she her pronouns because I like to be respectful. I think I think that if you want people to show basic respect and courtesy for you, you have to show it to other people. Essentially, I don't want to tell anyone else what to do with the pronoun issue, but that's where I draw the line. Jazz Jennings has done nothing to me. I actually kind of feel bad for Jazz Jennings if I'm honest about it. Can you imagine having your entire life filmed for public consumption? I know I can't. So I'm going to use she, her pronouns, and people can have whatever feelings they want about that. Let's read. The story of Jazz Jennings, whose parents began their attempts to transition her when she was just 5 years old, born a boy, had a major impact on the acceptance of transgenderism in America. As a child who made TV appearances with Barbara Walters, Jennings was an example par excellence for the perspective that some people innately belong to the opposite gender, an argument that was made more convincing because Jennings' parents had treated her as a girl since early childhood. In recent years, however, Jennings has repeatedly made headlines for health problems that offer counter evidence to the narrative that medicine can seamlessly transition adults or children from one sex to the one they supposedly belong to. So I want to say this. There is no evidence to support to conclude emphatically that Jazz Jennings' mental health problems are related to transition. We don't know. The fact is, they could be related to transition. They also may not be related to transition. I suspect, again, if my entire life was broadcast on reality TV from the time I was a child and I was constantly in the spotlight, whether or not I had transition surgery, to be quite frank, I would probably have some mental health problems. I think most people would have mental health problems if that had happened to them. I don't like the amount of publicity that I have now, and I barely have any anymore, and it's still more than I quite frankly want. And so I can completely understand why there might be mental health problems. I'm just not 100% convinced as of yet that those are directly related to the transition surgery. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm saying that we don't know for sure. Freeman Die Free says they confirmed the Nashville shooter was a female to male trans targeted a Christian school in a state that recently banned transing the kids. Is that confirmed though? Because I think this is a tragedy, first of all, but I also have not looked that much into it because I have been busy all day. I have been on the phone all effing day. Okay. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but I will say this. I did see a tweet that said that if you are seeing that the shooter was trans, that's not true. And so this conflicts with the tweet that I saw maybe 10 minutes before going live. But again, I have not looked into this yet, so I don't know what's true and what's not true. But I appreciate the super chat. And if someone could go and get more of a confirmation on what is true, can you send me a link via my Twitter DMs so that I can see that? Because, and again, I'm not questioning you. The only reason I would question it is I literally saw a tweet from someone that I do respect, because I don't know you, and so no offense, but I literally saw it right before I went live and I just didn't have the time to look into it. So if you can send me an article, that would be great. Okay, Andy No confirmed it. Well, I would really like to see an article from a reputable news outlet confirming it. I'm not questioning Andy No. I think Andy No is impeccable. I just want to see it because I think that a lot of information gets spread on Twitter that is not always true. All right. Well, then that's going to be the way it is. Maybe you can guide someone else in the chat to the article and they can send it to me. But again, until I can actually see it, I'm not going to take it as the gospel because no offense to you, I'm sure you're a great person. People lie on the internet. All right? Well, it says it's a woman, but were they trans is the question because I think the trans thing, were they a woman or were they a trans woman? That's the question because it's the trans thing that I've already seen debunked somewhere. But that might be a lie. I don't know. I'm not making a judge. I am not saying either way. Anyway, let's continue. A botched penile inversion vaginoplasty, there we go, that Jazz underwent at the age of 17 required multiple corrective surgeries and left her with greatly diminished sexual function. So these are the episodes of I Am Jazz that I watched at the time. And I gotta tell you, it was kind of terrifying to watch that play out. But the way that it was presented, and the reason I'm telling you guys this is because I want people to understand how Democrats perceive this, because I was definitely a Democrat when I was watching these episodes. It was kind of like it was clear that there were complications. It was clear that Jazz Jennings was in a lot of pain. It was clear that something didn't go as planned, but the way the episode made you feel was okay, surgeries have complications. This is something that's going to have to be dealt with, but ultimately it's going to be okay. And it was probably the best decision. I'm not suggesting that's what I would say now. I'm saying that at the time, being someone on the left that was watching these, just kind of not being pretty oblivious to what was going on in the world because I wasn't watching anything that wasn't lefty political news. So that was how I perceived it. Okay. Was that, okay, this is bad. It's obviously something bad has happened, but they didn't get you to blame the doctors. They made the doctors out to be kind of like the hero. They didn't get you to blame like the parents. The parents were also made out to be a hero. It was more like this is just what happens when there's surgery, there's complications, etc., etc. Now I look at the situation and I'm like, more and more information is coming out about the long-term effects of puberty blockers on kids when they're basically not going through puberty. And what happened with Jazz Jennings was because Jazz had always been on puberty blockers, the penis had basically atrophied and it was like really, really small because Jazz had never gone through puberty. And so, because the penis was really small, they didn't have enough skin to actually perform the normal surgery. And Jazz was, I think, one of the earlier people that they had ever actually tried this on, where they had put Jazz on puberty blockers so young that they didn't account for the fact that when it came time to do the transition surgery, that there would not be enough skin to work with. And I'm fairly sure they took skin from like her stomach to be able to complete the procedure or whatever. But it was like, it didn't occur to me at the time. It was like, so they didn't have a plan. They didn't know the consequences of it. They basically they had never thought through the consequences of their actions of doing this to kids and how it might lead to a worse outcome long term because like they just hadn't thought about the fact that functionally it was going to make it very, very difficult to perform this surgery. One of Jennings' surgeons, Marcy Bowers, later went public with hesitancy towards the World Professional Association for Transgendered Health Standards Care for Children. Marcy Bowers is also trans. Arguing the practice of giving 11-year-olds testosterone blockers and 13-year-olds estrogen treatment has made it impossible for doctors to later perform a traditional penile inversion vaginoplasty, on them, as doctors are required to take skin grafts in order to have enough tissue, often leaving patients with poor outcomes. Okay, Boom Her, who I do trust because Boom Her has been in my community forever. No offense, free men die free, but I know who Boom Her is, and she has developed credibility with me. NBC is confirming Andy has the right name, Audrey, who identifies as she, him. Oh well, I mean, that's gonna be a whole other fresh hell, isn't it? We'll have to look into that tomorrow. This is exactly what happened with Jennings. Her surgery was performed with stomach lining material to make up for the lack of available tissue. Soon after the surgery, her neovagina, I don't like that term if I'm honest about it, split apart. 3 corrective surgeries over a period of years were subsequently performed. Can you imagine what it must have been like to have 4 surgeries performed on your genitals when you're 18 or round about that age? So they started when Jazz was 17. I don't know like how old Jazz is now. It's probably been like 4 years. So between the ages of 17 and 21, you have 4 surgeries performed on your genitals? Can you imagine what a mind F that must be? Can you imagine the healing process of that? And by the way, the brain isn't even fully developed to process logic and reason until you're in your mid 20s, essentially until you're 25. That would make anyone depressed. I'm sorry. That would make anyone depressed. And Jazz was probably, and this is the impression that I got on the show, Jazz probably thought these surgeries were going to be the thing that would make her feel whole, that would make her feel like herself, that would be this big culmination of all of of her entire life. I bet this was one of the most anticlimactic things that's ever happened, because you're having this final surgery at 17 years old. It's kind of like going off to college and then finding out your college is like a hellscape, right? Like, except it's even worse than that because you've made permanent medical changes to your body. But I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of like a 17-year-old, right? So it's like, and going off to college is a big thing for a 17-year-old. That's why I chose that example. It's probably a horrible example. I'll probably get hell for it later, whatever. Anyway, you're 17 years old. You've got in your mind that this surgery is going to fix everything. This surgery is going to complete you. This surgery is going to make you who you are. This surgery is going to take care of all of your mental health problems and all of your depression. Which, by the way, I'm not necessarily saying that Jazz had depression because they were trans. I'm saying that a lot of kids have depression. I was depressed when I was that age. If you gave me a magic surgery that told me they was going to fix everything, I would probably be really excited too. And then not only does this surgery not fix everything, but the surgery goes horribly wrong. The whole thing falls apart. Literally, your newly formed nether regions completely fall apart. You have to have 3 more surgeries to fix the problem, and you can't even start living your life, which was supposed to be perfect because Jazz Jennings was supposed to go off to Harvard, was supposed to have this perfect life as a girl. Now that they've had their transition surgery, everything was supposed to be great. And now not only is everything not great, you have to have even more surgeries on your genitals before you're even old enough to have an alcoholic drink. That is a goddamn nightmare. Who wouldn't get depressed with that situation? Man, I think there was some naivete on the part of the pediatric endocrinologists who were proponents of early puberty blockade, thinking that this was that this just mad that just this magic can happen, that surgeons can do anything, said Bowers in an interview with Abigail Schreier, the author of Irreversible Damage. Oh, that's interesting that she interviewed with Abigail. But honestly, Bowers continued, I can't sit here and tell you that people who begin transitioning as children have better or even good results. They're not as functional. I worry about their reproductive rights later. I worry about their sexual health and their ability to find intimacy. So I don't know if this article is going to talk about it, but I saw a clip of Marcy Bowers talking about this over the weekend. And basically, what Marcy Bowers said, and can you imagine this? Marcy Bowers said that she had never worked with a trans kid that had had this transition surgery as a kid, that had been on puberty blockers as a kid. She had never worked with one that was able to have an orgasm after this surgery. Can you imagine living an entire life in which you had an optional surgery as a child that prevented you from having an orgasm your entire life? That you will never know what it's like to have an orgasm? That you have that taken away from you because your parents and your doctors convince you as a child that you need to do this? That's awful. That is mind-blowingly depressing. Yeah, that's a cruel torture. It really, really is. Following the initial surgeries, Jennings gained over 100 pounds through binge eating and experienced a range of mental health disorders. Jennings' mother, Janette, deflected theories that the difficulties were caused by the penile inversion vaginoplasty and argued that Jazz had long experienced mental health issues. Well, yes, that's true. They documented it on the show, which, by the way, if you're documenting your teenager's mental health issues on national effing television, that's probably child abuse now that we're thinking about it. Jazz Jennings couldn't have had any idea of what it meant to display your mental health issues on a reality TV show. But her parents damn well should have known better. Her parents never should have allowed this to happen. This is entirely her parents' fault, and not just the mother. I'm sorry, I know the mother is more prominent in the show than the father, but the father is there. The father lives in the flipping house. It's not like they're divorced or anything. They're both responsible for this, so far as I'm concerned. And like, and by the way, so for people who never watched the show, that wasn't the first time Jazz had gained a lot of weight. In fact, there were several episodes of the show leading up to the bottom surgery in which Jazz had to lose a lot of weight in order to be eligible for the bottom surgery. So this gaining of over 100 pounds, that was not the first time that happened. They all knew that Jazz was doing this. Janette Jennings claimed that Jazz's happiest time in life had been during the year following the first surgery, though she acknowledged that Jazz had spiraled thereafter into a depressive state and could barely get out of bed in the morning. Season 8 of the TLC show on Jennings' life, I Am Jazz, is now airing, and in a recent episode, Jennings has an alarming conversation with her mother. In a clip that has gone viral over the past week, Jennings says that she is completely broken and unable to be her true self. What if Jazz Jennings was just a little gay boy? What if Jazz Jennings, when she was 2 years old, was just a little gay boy that was just an effeminate gay boy, and the mother latched onto this and said, because you are effeminate, you must be a girl, and we must convince you that you are a girl. That's tragic. Sometimes, like, children are just little gay boys. Or dare I say, they're freaking butch lesbians in the training, in the making. They have more masculine energy. It can happen. Tomboys are a thing. Tomboys are a real thing. They don't always grow up to be butch lesbians. You know, a lot of them grow up to be straight, but they are a real thing. Exactly. Transing away the gay. One has to wonder if a lifetime of hormone treatments and surgeries intended to alter her appearance might have something to do with that. Jazz explains to her mother that she keeps going back to negative and that she can't get out of her head. She explains it just doesn't stop. Well, that's what depression is. And I also wonder too, how do the hormones, like, is Jazz on antidepressants? And how do the hormones interact with the antidepressants? I don't know the answer to that at all. It just popped into my head. Jazz's mother attempts to stop the breakdown and convince Jazz, who in a recent episode went on a date with a woman, that everything will be all right. It's okay. Give me a hug. I know what you're going through. We've been there before, she says. Jazz then comes clean with the truth. I just want to feel like myself, like that's it. I don't care, she says. All I want is to be happy and feel like me. I don't feel like me ever. Take note of what Jazz Jennings says here. I don't feel like me ever. So let's watch this clip real quick for people who haven't seen it.
So, are you feeling like you wanted to start talking about? Are you okay?
I'm okay.
I'm gonna get them to cry.
You know I can't get out of my head.
I know. No, listen.
It just doesn't stop.
It's okay. Give me a hug. It's okay. I know what you're going through. We've been there before.
No, it still doesn't stop now. And I'm already going back to negative.
But the more you're talking about yourself, it gets harder.
Mm-hmm.
You're digging in and it's making you put a magnifying glass on what's already difficult as it is. So this is hard for you. I know. And we don't want to push you
I know
anymore.
I'm the one doing it. Like,
I know you're your own worst enemy.
I want to point out here, the mother isn't even listening to Jazz. I don't know if other people see this, but it is extremely clear to me. The mother is not listening to the child. The mother is waiting to talk. The mother is not asking Jazz, what do you mean by that? What are you getting at? Like, how are you experiencing that? The mother is asking no questions. The mother's like, it's going to be okay, Jazz. We've been here before. Well, how does the mother know that? She doesn't even really understand what's going on. So how can she sit there and reasonably say, you're going to be okay, Jazz. We've been here before. We know what this is. You're not even asking any probing questions to find out what's going on.
I feel kind of all over the place and like my mind is very cluttered and not clear. And I really want to have that clarity. I really want to understand myself and be able to read my own soul and what I want. And it's just very challenging. And I think I'm kind of breaking down a little bit and spiraling into negativity. I just want to feel like myself. Like, that's it. I don't care. All I want is to be happy and feel like me. And I don't feel like me ever.
All of those surgeries.
Okay. I don't know who that is, but I don't want to listen to that person. Freaks me out. But yeah, so I don't feel like me ever. Well, guess what? That's true of most people. This is something that they're not teaching to kids that are coming out as trans or queer or non-binary or any of these things when they're in school. Most people don't know who they are. Most people, especially when they're younger, especially when they're going through puberty, feel awkward as F. Most people are not comfortable in their body. That is part of what the process of life is, to teach you through experience who you are, what you like, what you don't like. It's not even normal teen behavior, it's normal people behavior in general. I'm sorry. Like I am about to in a couple weeks have my what, 13th, 29th birthday. I'm about to turn 42 years old. All right? I know I shouldn't admit that on the internet, but it's true. 40 effing 2 years old. I cannot even believe this. But the reason that I'm saying this is that is there anyone that is older than their 40s watching right now that remembers what their 20s were like? Because I do. I remember in my 20s, I look back at my 20s now, and I don't think it was actually significantly better than being a teenager in terms of like how I saw the world or how I saw myself. Radical Moderate says, I swear I thought you were in your late 20s. Oh, Radical Moderate, this is why I love you. Yeah. Can we all remember back to our 20s for those of us who have, perhaps a little more seasoning, a little more wisdom, a little more life experience, and say that you don't know who you are in your 20s? And I know if anyone in their 20s is watching right now, they might not understand this yet because you feel like you're an adult, you're making your own money, you're out in the world, you're making your mark or whatever. You don't know shit in your 20s, man. You don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. And when you turn 30, it's going to get a little bit better. I promise you, your 30s are so much better than your 20s. I didn't want to turn 30. I was depressed as hell when I turned 30. I didn't even want to celebrate my birthday. My coworkers threw me a birthday party. I didn't want to go. I was actually really depressed when I turned 30, okay? My 30s turned out to be so much better than my 20s. Light years better than my 20s. And guess what? My 40s are already better than my 30s. Life is a process of experience. You don't know who you are as a teenager. We need to be teaching people that. You don't even know who you are in your 20s. That's when you're discovering yourself. That's when you're getting out into the world. That's when you are experiencing different aspects of life in a way that you can interact with it fully as an adult, but that doesn't mean you know everything. So we need to start teaching kids that this is just what life is. If you don't know everything in your teens, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. If you don't know everything in your 20s, guess what? That's how it's supposed to be, because life is about experience. And so to have in your mind at all that you are going to know exactly who you are and exactly what you want when you are that young is simply unrealistic. Janette, for the most part, tries to dissuade Jazz from introspecting too deeply, but the more you're talking about yourself, it gets harder. You're digging in and it's making you put a magnifying glass on what's already difficult as it is. So this is hard for you, I know, and we don't want to push it. Her mother should be sending her to therapy, is what needs to be going on. Janette, of course, has made millions off of Jazz's transition and became famous for it. She now runs her own organization, the Trans Kids Purple Rainbow Foundation, which aims to enhance the lives of transgender and gender nonconforming youth and their families. Janette has adamantly supported Jazz's transition and pushed Jazz to incorporate every available mode of transition to appear as much as possible as though she is a woman. Andre says, you know why, Carlin? There's scientific equations, karmic life laws are the real are real, that the average human takes 20 to 30 years to learn the top 20 respects definitions as skills plus as laws. I really appreciate that, Andre. I'd like to learn more about that. Thank you for sharing that. A recent clip from the TLC series shows Janette pressuring Jazz to dilate his neo-vagina. And again, I hate that term so much. Every day, Janette says that if Jazz doesn't do it, she will wring Jazz's neck. Men who undergo a penile inversion vaginoplasty are expected to dilate the open womb for over 2 hours a day for up to 2 years post-surgery, or shorter periods of time for the rest of their life. Otherwise, their womb can shrink. Can you imagine? 2 hours a day? 2 hours a day. Thank you, Andre. I appreciate that. Michael says, just a wee message to say thank you for covering this without the spice. The topic has so much depth, yet few want to acknowledge that. Thank you, Michael. I really do appreciate that. 2 hours a day? How do you even find the time? Okay, I'm going to give a little tip to the men watching. And I know a lot of the men watching are probably gay just because I attract gay men like moss to a flame. But just in case there are some straight men watching, I want to give you guys a little inside info. Sex, usually, no, there are exceptions to every rule, all right? So I'm not saying this is a universal rule, but I'm just saying that sex usually, for a woman, in my experience, if it goes on too long, becomes really effing boring. And it is no reflection on the person that you're with, usually. It's just that there is a time when it's really fun, and then if it continues to go on for too long, it gets boring and frustrating, and you have to kind of like fake it to get the act over with, because you reach a point where, you know, you're just over it and you want to go do something else. All right. And I see the women in the chat agreeing with me. They're like, yes. That time period, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, is significantly less than 2 hours. Okay? I cannot imagine anything more torturous than dilating for 2 hours a day, every single day of my life for the... Oh my God, what fresh hell is that? Wow. We have this tweet from Gays Against Groomers. And by the way, I think Gays Against Groomers is really awfully anti-trans lately. And I don't say that lightly. I just have enough inside information about Gays Against Groomers to know that they're basically against all trans people now, which I don't think is a good look. But whatever, they posted the clip, so let's see. They posted this clip. Jazz Jennings' mother speaks about forcing Jazz to dilate further mutilate their neo-vagina to keep the womb from closing. It's the brazen openness to admit to child abuse on national television. For us, this monster belongs behind bars. Well, I'm going to set that aside for a moment because I don't agree with Gays Against Groomers there. But let's watch the clip.
But with her, I'm worried about like her mental well-being and her dilation. The minute she leaves my house, we have a dilation problem.
That is a concern. When you don't have that watchful eye, they tend to go back to old patterns.
I have woken Jazz out of a dead sleep and taken the dilator and put the lubrication on it and said, here, you take this and you put it in your vagina. If not, I will. But Jazz is bad, even when I'm home once a day. I would be so mad if she goes away to college and that thing seals up. I would wring her neck. Can you imagine? No, I can't.
This mother is way too intrusive. We need to ask Joshua about this mother tomorrow night. We need to ask Joshua if this mother has Munchausen's by proxy. She's way too intrusive. It's weird, okay? That's just weird and creepy. Janette Jennings says she has woken up Jazz in the middle of the night and demanded that she dilate her neo-vagina. She said, I have woken, we already just saw the clip, I don't need to read that. Jazz's hesitancy to partake in this perhaps says something about her enthusiasm for undergoing a vaginoplasty. Yes, this was indeed on TV. Yes, it was. Indeed, it was. Another piece of evidence that Jennings is not as gung-ho as her mother on being surgically crafted into an imitation of a woman, I don't think that that's fair, is her recent assertion, God damn it, that the genitalia should not matter. By the way, guys, again, the reason I'm using the she, her pronouns is because I think that conservative publications come across as looking spiteful and petty when they refuse to honor what people actually want to be called. Again, I think people deserve basic respect and courtesy. That's my position. You're welcome to disagree with it. If we don't define someone's life based on what's between their legs, things would be so much different, Jazz says during an episode. Aha, a moment of enlightenment that perhaps Jazz should have been allowed to come to on their own prior to having genital surgery 4 effing times. Nick says, wife definitely agrees with your assessment of sex. I know. And again, it's not a reflection on you, gentlemen. It has nothing to do with you at all. It's just that, that's just the way it goes. All right. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Thank you. Thank you, Nick Incognito. The medical issues that Jazz Jennings has encountered show just how disastrous gender transition is medically. It's ironic because Janette Jennings meant for Jazz's transition to inspire thousands of children to join Jazz in altering their sex. But that could be the unintentional effect. One more time. But could the unintentional effect be greater than that? Jazz's recent statement, I don't feel like me ever, raises the specter that Jennings, despite being the poster child for transgenderism and having had this pushed on her since the age of 2, may herself be secretly devastated by what was done to them. Well, I think that's reading into it a bit much. Maybe. Could it be? Sure. Maybe. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that's inferring mind reading that I don't think is healthy. If Jazz regrets transitioning, Janette Jennings' goal to advance transgenderism through Jazz could majorly backfire. I mean, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something if Jazz Jennings ended up detransitioning? Could Jazz Jennings even detransition now? If they wanted to? How would Jazz Jennings' mother react if after all of this, Jazz decided to detransition? I mean, that's scary. Can you imagine how scary that would be for Jazz? Who, by the way, if Jazz, and I'm not suggesting I know this for a fact because we don't know. We don't know either way. But if Jazz Jennings in their head wants to detransition, but is afraid to tell their mother because of the show and because of the spotlight and because of the notoriety, that's gonna fuck Jazz Jennings up something fierce. You think Jazz Jennings has mental health issues now? Just wait to watch what happens in a couple years if all of this really did turn out to be a mistake, because Jazz Jennings is going to be a train wreck. And I don't say that with any sort of celebration. I think it's a sad thing. I think that Jazz Jennings needs to go to a real therapist, not the trans therapist, a real therapist, to talk about this and to work through what has happened to her her entire life. But the last thing I want to say on this one before we move on to this other detransitioner video I want to watch is I really want everyone to keep in mind Jazz Jennings is a victim of this ideology. It is not Jazz Jennings' fault what has happened. It is because Jazz Jennings listened to the adults in her life that she is in the situation that she is in right now. So I really want to encourage everyone. Attacking Jazz Jennings is not going to be productive in this particular fight. If you want to talk about the mother, then fine, have at the mother. And by the way, have at the father too, because he was involved in all of this. But I would just really refrain from insulting Jazz Jennings, being combative towards Jazz Jennings, because Jazz Jennings is a victim of this, and it does not make our side look good to be attacking victims who have been dragged into this ideology by the people that they trusted most in life. If they had just waited, allow Jazz to socially transition, allow Jazz to wear dresses, allow Jazz to dress up as a mermaid, allow Jazz to, grow their hair long or whatever. If they had just waited, this started when she was 2 years old. She was a kid and was in. Just because you turn 18 doesn't mean your brain shuts off to the rest of what you've experienced in life. It started 21 years ago. It is not a good look to attack people and further victimize people who have been victimized their entire life. It's just not a good look. And it is going to win no points. And it's going to gain nothing except increased hate and vitriol. Jazz Jennings is the victim here. And I hope people keep that in mind. I suspect they won't, but I hope they do.